Well, this has been great, and what a great addition to the Mormon Transitions and Mormon Stories sort of library to hear about that option that Josh explored and successfully implemented with his family, noting that it's not going to work for all families. I think we had a comment. We definitely had a comment from a listener that basically said, I'll see, Annie wrote, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to try to do what you have done with Joshua's family. That is a huge accomplishment. So people are impressed, Joshua. Let's go ahead and move to the two kind of main themes that you guys wanted to share. One was how science and secularism really have helped been guides and supports for you guys when raising children, because how to raise healthy children is a main concern. So many people are like, oh my gosh, if we leave the church, our kids will become prostitutes and drug addicts, and we'll lose all sense of meaning and purpose and identity and start having sex with everybody and that sort of thing. And then the second part was what role the military played in helping you form a healthy community. So let's start with the first, if you guys are comfortable talking about that.
Do you want me to do the first and you do the military?
Sure.
Okay. I think for me, it was, all of the rules, when you think about it, as a Mormon, of, why you shouldn't drink alcohol, why you shouldn't be sexually promiscuous. And, that's a little bit premarital sex and like sexual promiscuity, I think, are kind of two different things. But anyway, we'll get into that. But all of these reasons for like things that you should do, I was always more focused on the reason why you shouldn't do them. It's not like you shouldn't do drugs because God says you shouldn't. You shouldn't do drugs because they harm your body and they can become addictive. And there's all of these other consequences that can happen, right? So, I mean, that was always my perspective anyway. So that didn't really change once we left the church. It was still, don't do things that hurt other people or yourself. So whether that's, drinking alcohol and getting into a car and driving and crashing, or, whatever it is, that those things are still wrong for the morality behind it. And I don't know, we can get into more of the morality part of it, of like how we came to that conclusion if we want, but that just never really changed for me. And what I realized is that there's a lot of resources out there that help with parenting that don't come from religion. They come from like social scientists, people who have studied, relationships and communities and psychology and all of these different things. I mean, there's so much information out there and so many different things that you can try, but you have to be proactive. You have to go seek it out, because it's not going to be spoon-fed to you like it was when you are a Mormon and you go to church every Sunday and you have a lesson once a month about, parenting or whatever, it's different. And so you do have to be proactive, but I've never not been able to find answers to a question that I had through secular resources. There's just so many out there. I mean, there's almost too many, it's not like there's a shortage in any way. And
do you have some examples?
Like of a specific resource, or?
Yeah, some of the resources that were really useful to you.
Well, this sounds kind of cheesy, but a lot of the blogs on like Huffington Post's parenting, which, I mean, I don't necessarily, I'm not like a blogging person, but a lot of their blogs are written by psychologists or different, parenting people from various areas or expertise. And a lot of the things I was like, yeah, that makes sense. There are a few books that I read. I can't remember the names of them right now, but they were all written by, How to Parent Teens, all written by
like raising
psychologists,
free thinkers. There was one by Phil Zuckerman called Living a Secular Life.
Yeah. A lot of podcasts that I've listened to.
Didn't Dale McGowan write Parenting Beyond Belief or something like that?
Yeah, Parenting. We read that one.
That's one.
Yeah, there's just so many resources. Another thing that I've actually found that's been helpful is I'm actually getting my master's degree right now in education.
Oh, congrats.
Thanks. And a lot of the techniques that I'm learning in my education program, I've used in our family setting. So like one of the things that we did was, it's called an affirmation circle, where we did this at Thanksgiving. Cause Thanksgiving when you're a Mormon used to be, we'd all sit around the table and talk about our blessings and what we're grateful for. And, then you have family prayer and then you have Thanksgiving dinner. So I kind of wanted to have some sort of structure or tradition that was similar to that. And so we did this technique in my education classes, and it was an affirmation circle. And we had, we made a circle with our family, and we had a chair in the middle, and the youngest has to come and sit in the chair. And then everyone in the circle goes around and says what they love about that person. And if you're in the middle, you can't talk. You just have to sit there and listen. And while everyone goes around and takes turns and says something good about you. And then when they're all done, then you choose someone else and they come in, and then it's their turn, and you kind of go on. And so we did that with our family, and we just did this last Thanksgiving. And it was basically a secular testimony meeting, because it ended up in tears and everyone telling each other how much they love each other. And, hearts were touched, love was, it was the same, the spirit was there, right? Like it was the same feeling that same feeling of bonding and love that you get from sharing your testimony as a family. And, so I think there's just things you can do like that are, that you can keep structure and tradition and communication, that the church is so good at giving people this structure. You have to spend time together, once a week for family evening, and, you're going to sit and have scripture study every day. And that's just time that you're spending with your kids. And so you can substitute those things, do those same patterns, but just with secular things. They don't have to be centered around religion.
And I just have to echo that. It's so often that we have this traumatic experience with the religion. And so our reaction is we're going to do the opposite of whatever we did when we were in the religion. We're going to hate everything that has to do with the religion and avoid anything that even reminds us or smells like the religion that we are a part of. And that's probably natural for many. I'm not saying that's bad or evil, but once we get a really safe grounding and a healthy perspective, I think a really wise perspective is to kind of do what Alain de Botton talked about in his Atheism 2.0 TED Talk, which is, why don't we as secular people steal the best plays out of the playbook of religion? And if a secular family meeting works, have that. If music works, have that. If some sort of spiritual or wise thought every morning is useful, have that. If some type of mindfulness meditation like prayer works, have that. And don't feel like just because a religion did it, it's bad. Instead, say, wow, religions have been really successful. What can we learn from them to make our lives even better?
Yes, absolutely. And that's kind of what I realized about my own upbringing in the church, was the thing that I gained the most from the structured Mormon activities in our home was that we were spending quality time together, talking about we were having real conversations. That's what my family was not super like emotional, touchy-feely testimony meeting kind of stuff. It was more about like, let's talk about interesting things. And so, having scripture study, having family evening, those things facilitated those kinds of conversations. And so we've been able to do that with our family. It's the same thing. We just don't talk about religion. We talk about politics. We talk about, different moral conundrums. What would you do if this were the case hypothetically? Or, it's such you can still create that environment without the religion.
Yeah. We've just taken whatever worked in Mormonism and, we kind of ran it through our secular grinder and do a lot of the same things. We just leave the supernaturalism out of it. And we talk more about, when we're talking about morals or ethics, we talk about, reasons, the utilitarianism of a choice, or the consequences of option A or option B, and try to give better reasons for being moral. One thing that I thought was important was to continue some type of like family home evening. And so I tried for a while to do secular family home evening.
It didn't work.
and the kids really hated it. They hated the structured format of it. I was giving them lessons on,
philosophy,
David Hume and Immanuel Kant and
Heidegger and
right.
Kierkegaard. And
I'm just trying to make it interesting. I was making Heidegger cool, but that didn't work. They just said we don't want to do that. So I said okay, but I didn't admit defeat. Instead, I took up cooking. Heidi was getting kind of bored of cooking every night.
He's way better cook than me.
So I took up the skill of cooking and took it upon myself to make dinner almost every night. I will make dinner, and part of that is everybody sits down and we have a family meal, because research shows that families that eat together and have interesting topics and discussions, they do better in school. They stay away from drugs and alcohol. They avoid premarital sex or pregnancy. All these negative outcomes can be avoided just by doing something as simple as eating together. And we usually
having good conversation.
Yeah. That's sort of the rule. I make the dinner if we have some good conversation.
And one way to do this, if you are not a great conversationalist or your kids won't talk, we started this tradition of everyone has to go around and say one good thing and one bad thing that happened to them that day. And sometimes it actually started because we were taking turns and I was just asking our kids, what happened today? Tell us one thing that happened today. And they were always negative. They were always saying something negative, like, oh, this happened today. It was terrible, terrible. So I said, okay, wait, you can't do that. You have to first say, before you can tell me a bad thing, you have to say a good thing first. So it kind of turned into the good thing, bad thing. And our kids, we've done that almost since, actually, we did that before we left the church. So we've done that for a long time. And it's just been a great thing because it kind of forces them to look back on their day and kind of evaluate it and notice the good as well as the bad. And a lot of times, they'll tell us the good thing and then they'll be like, well, I didn't really have any bad things today. Or, they'll tell us two good things that happened. And so I think it's a good technique to use with your kids.
That's great. We do that too. Every dinner we start with something they're grateful for is what we do.
Okay.
Yeah. And Josh, I love that idea of not only challenging stereotypical gender roles where you're taking over some of the cooking duties and giving Heidi a break, but you're finding constructive ways to engage with your kids that don't have to be all serious and philosophical. It's just living, right?
Right.
Healthy, happy living.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. There's just so much out there that is available to you. I know it is scary. I was scared when we first left, and it was kind of like the fear of how are we going to raise our kids? But, this is actually, I'll add this. This was actually something that happened. I talked earlier about being one of the things I liked about the church was like the formula and the structure of it, that if you do all of these things, then this will happen. But at the same time, it was also very stressful because you as a parent were so invested in your kids having to meet these certain milestones. And if your child doesn't go on a mission or doesn't get married in the temple or whatever, then it's like your life is over. It's devastating. And there's so much pressure and like anxiety that I felt especially as my kids were getting older. Grace was going into Young Women's. It's like, I have to like control almost my kids' behavior so that they don't go off the path. And leaving the church and not having that like stress or anxiety anymore. I mean, of course I still want my kids to be happy and successful, but that definition had changed, and it opened up so many more possibilities for them. And suddenly it was like, it was a huge burden lifted off of me, because I realized as their mother, I just had to provide a good environment, a safe structure, communicate with them, show love for them, and they will be able to make their own path. And it doesn't have to be, the one that I've chosen or the church has chosen for them. So it was very, very liberating. Even though it was kind of scary at first, it ended up being very freeing and took a lot of anxiety off of me.
So it was kind of good for your relationship with your kids, it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely.
And for each other.
Yes.
So really quick, Jonna writes, Heidi and Josh were my biggest support through my transition.
Hey, hey, Jonna.
All right, Josh, let's talk about how the military has been an important community for you. The listeners are saying they want to hear more. They want to hear from you more, Josh. So let's have you step up and tell that part of the story. And Heidi, I know the listeners are loving everything you're talking about. So.
So I've been in the military since 2000, did my medical education, and then deployed to Iraq 2009, 2010. And I've been here at Fort Benning, which is, the big military base for infantry and Rangers. And, you have to be in the military to understand the type of community it is. It's similar in the church in a lot of ways, because we have this shared history, these shared traditions, these shared values. We fight together side by side. We go through some harrowing experiences together. Most people have probably seen that show Band of Brothers.
It's so good.
I've never gone through anything like that. And I wouldn't say my military experience has been, that bonding, but we do have a bond because we're in the military together. And in the medical corps, we take care of each other. We take care of each other's families, and we grow a tight bond. The thing that I noticed was most of my friendships before leaving the church were with other people in the church. That was my group. That was my tribe. Leaving the church allowed me to get to know people better at work, to socialize with them after work and on the weekends. We've started book clubs with people at work, whiskey clubs. That's one of the things we're doing now. We just socialize. We have fun with these people. And
they kind of fill the same role as, like, in a ward, you have these other families that that you can rely on to, like, help you out if you get stuck in a traffic jam and you can't pick up your kids, like that they have your back and they'll go pick up your kids for you or whatever. And those people were always the people in our ward before.
What's a whiskey club? And to a believing Mormon, that might sound really scary, and I'm not promoting it or not promoting it. I just, for those who might feel like, oh my gosh, that sounds evil, talk about why that's been interesting or valuable.
Well, I drink
whiskey.
I love whiskey. I drink alcohol. I drink it responsibly. I drink it in moderation.
We went to Scotland for our 20th wedding anniversary. We both really like whiskey, and if you didn't know this, there's a lot of nuances to the different types of whiskey. So
and we don't drink whiskey because we like to get drunk.
No.
That's the wrong way to drink whiskey. There's a lot of history and tradition and art that goes into creating, whiskey, and I love it. It's great. Lots of different types of whiskeys are all around the world. Different whiskeys from different parts of Scotland.
The whole distilling process,
right?
too.
Different flavors, different aromas, and it's really enjoyable. So we get together with a lot of my people at work, and everybody brings a bottle or two, and we sample different whiskeys and kind of figure out what we like. And
they have yummy food.
So we bring food that goes along with it. It's just a good time. Everybody
if somebody's like, but that just sounds evil because alcohol is evil, and what are you doing? Stop that. What is valuable to your life about that? Talk about why that's enriched your life, something that people would associate with evil.
Alcohol can be evil. If you drink too much of it, it can destroy lives, including your own and your family. So, but in moderation, it can be a great thing. I think Mormon activities would be so much more enjoyable if they could have a little alcohol at these. It would be a lot of fun.
What does it do?
Well, it's a social lubricant. It lowers your anxieties. just enough so that you feel like you enjoy the social event. I'm an introvert too, so I don't really like socializing all that much unless I'm with a pretty small group of close friends. But this is why people have cocktail parties, so they can go into a new situation with lots of people and actually enjoy it after 1 or 2 drinks.
And this gets like a dumb question, but you can remember the conversations even after you've had a few drinks.
Yeah,
oh, yeah.
And it makes the conversations more real. I think it makes them more enjoyable. I think you're more honest with yourself and others. We laugh a lot more than we do if we're at a teetotaling party. So it's a lot of fun. And I don't just like whiskey. I also got into beer, craft beer for a while, and cocktails. We went to New Orleans with a friend of ours, another military anesthesia provider, and really fell in love with the cocktail culture that started there in New Orleans. So, I'm an amateur bartender, and
in case you can't tell, Josh is really into food. He's a foodie. He loves to cook. He loves researching food. He loves like the different tastes and textures and how different flavors go together. He should have been a chef in another life. So it's like a hobby. It's like, it's not about like drinking alcohol to get tipsy or drunk or anything like that. I mean, it's like the food culture. It's part of experiencing good food paired with good drinks, and like the history and the craft that goes into making it and all of that.
It's kind of, isn't there a philosopher named Epicurus or something? Epicurean, is that kind of?
Right. Yeah. I think it's a branch of like hedonism, which is, you should enjoy life. The pleasures of your life should outweigh the pains. And I think this is, people say, oh, hedonism, that's such a terrible thing. But, the Book of Mormon is in line with hedonism. They say men are that they might have joy. Well, that's one way that I view life now. I should do things in my life that bring a lot of joy to it and minimize any pain or suffering, both to myself and other people. So I think, drinking in moderation, socially,
with good food,
with good food,
with enjoying good company, is a very good experience.
It's amazing.
It's a pleasurable experience.
Yeah.
Josh, what else? So you mentioned the whiskey groups. What are the other ways that your military community, and Heidi too, that the military community has really filled in? What other types of activities have been valuable?
I don't know, like,
just
we get
friendships.
together. Yeah, just friendships. Like, my best friend is in the military. He's another anesthesia provider. Him and his wife are coming over tonight. We're going to have food. We're going to have drinks. We're going to talk. We used to have a book club with other military friends where we would, read books and then get together again over dinner and drinks and talk about the books.
And those book clubs are so much more interesting than the book clubs we've had with our Mormon friends, because our military friends they come from such different backgrounds that they have such a different perspective on whatever it is that we're reading. And so it just makes the conversations all that more interesting because they're so diverse. They're just totally different backgrounds.
Love it. Okay.
And just as far as personal friends, I guess one of the things that's changed about us is that when we were in residency and our children were small, and so we really needed that tight-knit community of other, like I did. I needed other moms who had kids the same age that could do play dates with, and we could go to the park together and trade babysitting and all of that. Now the phase of life that our kids are in, they are so busy and we are so busy with them. And honestly, I just want to hang out with my kids sometimes. Like, on a weekend, like when Grace comes home from college and she's here for the weekend, I want to talk to her. I want to hang out with her. And so it's just kind of changed. I mean, we still have our friends and our social life and everything, but I don't think we don't need it in the same way that we did when our kids were younger, and our kids are self-sufficient. I mean, they drive and they're in high school, and it's just different. Our family needs are different. So we haven't tried to necessarily find that same tight-knit community of other couples with kids the same age, because we don't really need that at this point in our lives.
Got it. Okay, so anything else about the military? I guess there's this idea of a safety net that you feel in your ward, where if you got cancer or if you got pregnant or if you needed your lawn, the sod laid out on your lawn, that the ward's going to be there, Johnny on the spot. And I'm wondering whether whether this is your position is sort of one of privilege in that you have money, you have education, you don't need that level of support, or do you feel like your military friends would be there for you if someone got cancer, if there was a death, if someone got sick or whatever?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Just our group of medical providers at the hospital, we're pretty tight. And yeah, if something happened and I needed somebody to help out, there's definitely, a handful of people that I can call and they would be over right away. No questions. Like in that sense, they kind of fulfill the role of the elders quorum or the high priest quorum or the relief society.
That's great.
It's great.
And there's also this element too of, when you're Mormon, once you meet someone who's maybe not in your ward, but you know that they're Mormon, there's that automatic sense of, oh, I can trust them, or I know something about them. Maybe you don't know everything about them, but you feel like you know something about them. There's kind of that same dynamic with the military. Our kids might meet, that they bring home a new friend from school and you find out that their dad is, in the military. It's kind of like you kind of feel like, okay, I feel like I kind of know something about this family. Don't know everything, but you kind of know something. It's kind of like, it kind of gives you that sense of I guess, trust. And maybe that's not a good thing because, that can absolutely mislead you sometimes, but there is kind of that element there, I think, with the military that's similar to the church.
Very cool.
So.
Grace writes, mom/BFF. Sorry, Dad. Great, you were left off. But
I thought you were daddy's girl, Grace. Come on.
You're supposed to be in class right now.
Yeah, go back to school.
Michelle writes, Grace sounds like a great kid. A couple people, both Katrina and Michelle, are writing that they also have experienced the military as being a great place. Grace just wrote, she loves you too, Dad, with 3 hearts. So you've been redeemed, Josh. Not quite BFF status, but 3 hearts. That's not terrible. Okay, so Emily writes, what do you miss about Mormonism, if anything?
Well, I don't miss a lot. I would say that Mormonism has a community of support. I think that's the best thing that the church has going for it, is that tight-knit community. Mm-hmm. I would just say that's not why I was in the church to begin with, and that's not really what I miss now, but I know a lot of people do miss it. And if you don't have the military to fall back on, there's plenty of other non-religious or religious communities out there besides the Mormon church. So they are kind of a one-stop shop for all of your, Maslow's needs, your psychosocial needs. It's all there, but you can find communities that provide that support outside of the church. And I think they're healthier communities because you can have all the good of a community without all of the negative baggage. I'm sorry, I just don't miss a lot of the church. I think,
I can't really think of anything. I mean, I guess the only thing that I maybe kind of regret is that, or miss, is that the fact that our kids can't get cheap tuition at BYU. I don't know.
Public education can be expensive, right? Or private educations.
I don't really want our kids to go to BYU. So no, that's not really anything I miss. I can't really, I guess the community would be that, but I agree with Josh. I think you can find that.
So what about identity? I'm a Mormon. I know what my life and purpose is. I know who I am.
That was comforting, but it's kind of a shortcut. It's just provided for you. I didn't choose to be a Mormon. That was just the identity kind of thrust upon me. The thing I like now is that I'm free to choose my own beliefs, my own identity, my own purpose, my own values. There's this analogy that sometimes I heard in the church about a kite, and the little girl asked, Daddy, why is the kite attached to the string? Why can't we just let it go and let it fly higher? And the dad explains, well, we need the string to keep the kite up. If we let it go, it crashes. And, we're kind of like the kite, and the string is kind of like those commandments, restrictions, the culture of the church. I never like that analogy because I don't think I'm a kite. My like spirit animal is a bird, and we are birds, and we're birds, and we're tied, up, and we can't fly where we want to fly. We're not being we're not fulfilling the measure of our creation. So once we left the church, I felt like that string was cut, and it's a little scary, because I get to choose where I fly, where I go. But it's my adventure to take, and it's been nothing but good for us.
Yeah. I have a cat, and birds become prey when they're tied down.
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Heidi.
I agree. I totally agree. And I think it's been very rewarding to create my own identity. And it's hard. And I feel like there is part of me that will always be Mormon. Mormonism as like a pseudo ethnicity or something. Like it's always going to be part of who I am. I can't not acknowledge that part of myself. But in terms of finding a purpose and all of that, I feel like, it was hard. I did have to kind of wade through that time of feeling like, oh my gosh, this is scary. Who am I? What's my point? Like, does it not have any meaning? But, you push through it, you kind of figure out, you think, you read, you study, the same things that you're encouraged to do in the church, right? Read, ponder, and pray. Is that what it is?
Not the pray part.
Maybe not the pray part, meditate, whatever it is you want to do. And you find your own purpose. And, I found that through, going back to school, getting my degree, wanting to become a teacher. I get it through feminism, identifying as a feminist, just being a parent, being a mother. I have so many other identities, being a friend, just a friend, a wife. I mean, there's just so many other identities that I have that are super important. And I've just tried to, strengthen those parts of myself rather than focusing on this Mormon identity that I agree is something that I was just born into. I didn't choose it. It was just something that I was raised with.
Does the idea of spirituality mean anything to you guys now, or do you not like the term, or is there secular spirituality that's important? Anything like that?
I'm comfortable with the term as long as we're not talking about a disembodied, non-physical spirit that lives in our body. I think there's always parallels. We've talked in this podcast about times where we've felt the spirit. I feel the spirit all the time now, but it has nothing to do with the church. But I have moments of awe and wonder and amazement, and they're usually associated with listening to music or watching a movie or being out in nature on a hike or on my bike and going on a long bike ride or spending time with my family or kids or Heidi. That's when I feel that now. It has nothing to do with religion. It has everything to do with our minds and the things that our minds do. I still feel that sense of amazement, wonder, and awe. And there's a purely natural explanation for it, and it's all happening in my brain.
But that doesn't mean that the experience isn't powerful. It's still a very powerful experience.
Right. Or valuable.
And meaningful.
Meaningful.
Yeah. Like I want to keep having those experiences. And so does Josh. And we do. We still have them. It's just we put different meaning onto them.
What if someone would ask, how could any marriage survive without Mormonism? How could your marriage be healthy? Why not just go sleep around with everybody and divorce because it's all about your needs? What's been, what's kept you guys together?
Well, I sure hope that the only reason that he was faithful to me was because the church told him he had to be. That would really suck if that's the only reason why he was faithful to me. No, I mean, of course, that is not what our marriage was based. Our marriage was not based on the church told us that we have to act this way, therefore we're going to act this way. committed to each other because we loved each other, and we continue to love each other. So we wouldn't want to do something that would hurt the other person. I mean, that's how I would.
Yeah, I think, again, we just carried our relationship forward, and we kept being faithful to each other for all the same reasons we were faithful to each other before, because there's a lot of happiness that comes from being in a stable relationship, whether you're married or not, and having kids and having intimate relationships with people. Like, that is a key component of human well-being and happiness, is having those close relationships, and most importantly with your spouse and your kids. So I value them just like I valued them before. Yeah.
Any beliefs in God or Jesus or resurrection or afterlife for either of you?
No, not at all. Like Laplace said to Napoleon, I have no need of that hypothesis. I don't feel that there's any need to believe in a God. I just don't. I can't. It's not something that I can choose to do. Like, you hear this phrase all the time. It drives me nuts. Faith is a choice. I don't think belief is a choice. I think it's this emergent property that just comes because of what we know, or our experiences, or our emotions. And I just can't wrap my head around the idea of God or Jesus anymore. So, and I don't miss them at all.
Yeah, I don't have, it was a little bit hard for me early on, coming to terms with that, with my sister, Charity's death. But I think the way I look at it now, and I think it's hard for my family too, because, I've had family members say to me, like, how, if you don't believe in life after death, like, that's so sad because you think that you're not going to see Charity again. And I look at it differently. Like, I think it's actually worse to imagine her being in heaven right now, all by herself, pining away, having to watch as her husband marries another woman and raises their child in a new family. To me, that's sad. I don't want to believe in that, and I don't believe in that. And so it's actually it's a little more comforting to me to know that she had her life, and I want to celebrate that life and remember it and honor it any way that I can, pass on memories of her to her son. But, that doesn't mean, it doesn't affect anything just to have this belief that she's up there in heaven watching. I don't know, that to me, that's not a very comforting idea. And the idea of living forever is not very comforting either. We both read that book, A Short Stay in Hell. Is that what it's called? I can't remember the author's name. But it was
Stephen Peck, I believe.
Yes,
Stephen Peck.
Yes. Yeah. And it was really interesting. And it totally explored that idea of, do you really, what would it really be like to live for an eternity? And that really resonated with me. And then, I kind of came to terms with it. Josh told me this quote from Mark Twain. What did he say? Oh, is this it?
Yeah.
I do not fear death. I had been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born, and I had not suffered the slightest inconvenience from it.
Uh-huh.
So I just love that quote, because it's just so, it's very kind of comforting in a way. It's like, I don't know.
It gets to this idea that, our consciousness exists because of our brain. And if our brain doesn't exist anymore, then we're not conscious. It's not like we're in this limbo land where we're lonely, sad, disembodied, haunting houses. We just don't exist the same way that we didn't exist before we were born. And that sounds great compared to this idea of living forever and ever and ever. Maybe not a great place, if we don't do all the things we are supposed to, and God punishes us for it. But yeah, death is not scary to me. I'm an anesthesiologist, and so I give powerful drugs to people every day that takes away their consciousness, and these drugs act at receptors in the brain, shuts everything down. and they don't experience anything. It's not like there's this disembodied brain in there somewhere that continues to experience surgery, and thankfully so. And that just reminds me, every time I put somebody to sleep, I realize that, consciousness and everything that goes on, our experience of the world happens because of our brain, and our mind. And when our brain is gone, when we're dead, we don't experience anything. And I think that's great. It puts the emphasis and the value on this life, and making, having relationships and having joy right here, right now. Life is precious. We're lucky to be here. That which is rare is precious, and that which is we have in abundance is worthless.
After my sister died of colon cancer, I had a colonoscopy, and those are some of the best 30 minutes of my life. I don't remember much, but I sure felt good when it was over.
Yeah. People like my drugs.
Awesome. So a Mormon would say that living a life as a god over your own universe is preferable to like no longer existing. What would you say to that?
Not if you're a woman and you're forever having babies in the eternities. No. I would disagree with that.
Yeah, I disagree too. I mean, I don't want to get too philosophical, but we just finished watching Westworld, and that's a show on HBO that kind of explores this idea of, a god, so to speak, creating a world with artificial intelligent robots, and his efforts to create consciousness in these robots. And the idea of a god creating a whole bunch of creations designed to worship him and follow him, and
kind of narcissistic.
It's very narcissistic. And it doesn't make any sense to me at all why an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving God would do that with his powers.
Right. And it's like this idea of being a god and having your own world. You're taught that from a young age, and it was always with the assumption that this is a good thing. You should want this. And it's kind of like, well, wait a minute. I remember the first time I started to really think about that. Do I actually even really want that? Does that even sound interesting? Does that even sound like what I would actually want? And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, no, that's not something that is even that enticing. I just kind of thought that it was because that's the way it was always taught to me. So
the point you make that when you're dead, you won't realize it anymore. That's a fair point. But if I ask you now, what about the idea of never seeing or being with your children again? Certainly there's some sadness about that. Just the idea that at some point they die or you die and you're never together again. Certainly that makes you sad.
It doesn't make me sad because I'm not going to be around to experience that sadness. So I just focus on the here and now, the present, and the relationship that we have while the sun shines.
The only part of that would make me sad is if I were to see my children suffering and missing me, that's the part that would make me sad. But I won't know that. I won't see that. I won't be aware of that or conscious of that. And I think when you teach your kids, I think a lot of Mormons actually have a lot of fear about death. And
it's just people. It's a human. It's the human thing.
But I think everyone does. But I think that if you can work through it and really face it, I'm a huge Harry Potter fan. Dumbledore's words about, facing death are so true. Like you have to acknowledge everyone dies. It is a natural part of death. It's tragic when someone dies young, when they die early, or when they have suffered for a long time in pain before they die. Those things are tragic and terrible. But, death happens, and we all have to accept that and understand that and be okay with it in some way or another. And I think it's a natural process for people to kind of go through that and like come to terms with it. Our kids have, and they're, they kind of go through that phase. And I think at the end of it, I think it can help you just appreciate life all the more.
Yeah. Do you identify as atheist or agnostic?
I do, but I don't really use the label that much just because there's so much baggage with it. Everybody has an idea of what an atheist is. And usually it's not very good things, especially if they're religious. So while I try to avoid labels, I will use the atheist because I am an atheist. Heidi I think you prefer agnostic.
I don't like to put a label on it.
I don't either. I
don't. I really don't. Like, there is no label that I will happily say I don't believe in God. But I just don't feel comfortable. There's no label that I'm like, oh yeah, that defines me. So
I use secular humanist or metaphysical naturalist, retired Mormon, recovering Mormon. But I'd rather just like talk about what I think, what I believe, rather than slap a cheap label on it.
I guess I am comfortable with saying non-religious.
Yeah, or secular.
I am comfortable with that because I am non-religious. That's probably the only label that I'm comfortable using.
Annie asks how you would deal with believing Mormons who see atheism as just a scary term. And it sounds like you avoid using it because you realize that it's a scary term.
Yeah, I usually don't present, hi, I'm Josh, I'm an atheist. I keep my beliefs to myself, especially in the military. It's a very religious, very conservative community. So I don't talk about politics or religion a lot. I let them get to know me first as a person. And if they ask, then I would tell them. And by that point, hopefully a lot of the stereotypes that come along with the term would go away because they say, oh, well, I know Josh is not that way.
And his best friend is a believing Catholic. So
nice.
Yeah. And we talk
about religion all the time.
Religion.
Nice.
So.
Well, cool. I think we're kind of reaching the end. Are there other topics you guys really wanted to hit, or are you feeling like we covered the main things?
I feel pretty good.
Okay. So, I ask this every time, and I think it's a softball because I think everybody is going to say whatever they're doing is really working well, but I'll ask it anyway. Overall, do you feel like you're better off for your transition and having left the church? Heidi, you go first.
Better off.
And if so, in what ways? Are you better off now than when you were active and believing in the church? And if so, in what ways?
Yes, I would say that. And I guess I would say in my relationships, I think are probably where I've seen the biggest, my relationship with Josh has improved dramatically. And we had a great relationship before, but I think it's become even stronger and much more we're much more accepting of each other now that we are kind of free from like the cultural expectations of like gender roles that the church had placed on us, and our expectations of each other as like Mormons. That was kind of could be a source of tension for us. So it's with that gone, it's really strengthened our relationship. And I think it's improved my relationship with my kids, kind of what I was talking about before, just, lifting up that anxiety. I kind of can be a little bit controlling, a little bit OCD-ish. And just that freedom that I feel has just allowed me to enjoy my children and see them as first and foremost individuals with their own personalities, their own needs, instead of trying to view them as this like system that I needed to shape and conform so that it could go along this path. So it's really improved my relationship with my kids. And then I think it's just allowed me to open up my eyes to the wider world and see and explore things intellectually, like feminism, like, history. I have my undergraduate degrees in history, and just be able to view things that I would have felt that I couldn't have done that when I was Mormon, or I would have been going outside of the bounds the Lord had set, so to speak, with different cultural interpretations or things like that. So intellectually, it's been very freeing and liberating. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think things have gotten better for me. And I don't want to put too rosy a picture on life as a secular person. It's not like happy clappy atheism. It's the best and everybody should do it. But I do have much less cognitive dissonance now than I did in the church. I don't feel that emotion at all. I have a lot less guilt. I don't beat myself up over stupid things that I shouldn't feel guilty about. I still feel guilt when I do things that are bad, but that's for a good reason. I feel a lot more freedom to believe what I want to believe for the reasons that I choose to believe them. Freedom to act in ways that I want to act for the reason that I want to do them. I feel a lot more authenticity. I think that's probably the best thing, is I just feel like a much more authentic person now than I was in the church. And also, yeah, just to echo Heidi, I feel like my relationships with her, most importantly, with my kids, they're better. You know, they're not perfect, but they're better. My relationships with friends, I think, are more authentic. And I enjoy life a lot more now than I did, I think, before. And so it's been a good thing. It's been a rough journey, especially some of those early years getting here, but it's been a journey well worth taking, and I'm happy where we're at.
Yeah. And I just like want to add on to that is, and I kind of told this to my sister who's transitioning as well, is it is hard. It's hard. You're going to have those years even where it is hard and you have to figure things out and you kind of have to push through it, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. And like, ultimately you will have the freedom to shape your future. And that's scary, but it's also exciting. And, so just, try to get support, try to reach out for other resources, things like Mormon stories, Mormon transitions. I mean, we didn't really mention this in our story, but that we found Mormon stories, or I can't remember what we found first, if it was Stay LDS. Anyway, we found you, John Dehlin, on in the internets, early in sometime around 2008, 2009. And it was really helpful for us. And just to know that there were other people going through this same thing. And so there are people out there, there are resources out there that you can do, and just push through it. Keep going, even if it's really hard, because it will get better.
Love it. All right. Well, you guys know how we end Mormon stories. You gotta give us your testimony, whatever that is. So I think let's let Josh go first, and then we'll have Heidi close us out. What do you believe now? What do you stand for?
Okay. Well, I wrote some notes, actually. I hope that's okay if I refer to them.
That's great.
I believe life is precious and it's finite. I believe in happiness, and that people can find happiness without religion, even more of it. I believe marriage and family or close friendships, freedom, security, happiness, meaning, purpose are all good things. I believe in truth. I think that science and skepticism and personal experience are the best ways to discover that truth. The rest of it's kind of cheesy, but
say it. Bring the cheese.
I
Bring
can't.
it.
You might get emotional.
It's too much.
That's good. Emotion is good.
I believe people are fundamentally good, and we don't need religions to take credit for the goodness that is inherent within all people. There's also a lot of badness that's inherent in people, but people are fundamentally good, and that's my testimony.
I love it. Amen. All right, Heidi.
I believe in all of those things, and if I could just encapsulate everything into like maybe one thing, I guess I believe in humanity and relationships. I think that relationships with other people are the most important things in life, and whatever whatever kind of success or whatever you have, or failures even, doesn't really matter in terms of outside things, but it does matter in terms of relationships. So that's ultimately the thing that's going to bring you happiness and sense of fulfillment, identity, all of those things. So I just think that's really what I believe in. And same thing as Josh is like, I have this belief that people really are good. There's goodness out there. And yes, we tend to focus on the negative. We see the negative. The negative is out there. There's a lot of evil in the world, but there's so much goodness. And as a Mormon, I used to think that goodness was confined to the church. And now that I'm not in the church, I realize it's everywhere and it's amazing. And so we're pretty lucky to be alive at this point, living in the world that we live in.
Well, Heidi, I'm so grateful you reached out to me and that we ended up doing this interview. Heidi and Josh, both of you, I've appreciated your support from afar for many, many years. There are lots of people I think of as just kind of special, and you guys count. So thank you for staying connected all these years. Thank you for being willing to be vulnerable and to share your awesome stories, and for all you guys have done. I know that your story is going to help a lot of people who are scared, hesitant to take that leap. This isn't about encouraging people to take leaps, but certainly if people feel scared or hesitant, like they can't be happy or can't be healthy, I think your story stands as a great example of health and happiness and thriving after Mormonism. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you, John, for all that you do. Keep doing it. It's
I will. As long as people support me, I'm going to keep doing this. Emily writes, y'all have totally hijacked my afternoon. Thanks for sharing your story. It resonates.
Sorry, Emily.
Annie writes, great interview, very relatable and helpful for believers and ex-Mormons. Donna writes, what an amazing podcast. Thank you so much for addressing folks of no religion. I so look forward to your podcasts. Julie writes, thank you for your openness and honesty. A real life story, very helpful. Bruce writes, thank you, Heidi and Josh. So in addition to thanking you guys, thanks to our listening audience. You guys asked good questions that help make this more engaging. Thanks to all who tuned in over Facebook. A couple thousand people tuned in over the past 3+ hours. And of course, we're going to have more people join offline as we share this through Mormon Stories and Mormon Transitions. So love to everybody. Gratitude. Thanks for everyone who financially supports Mormon Stories and Mormon Transitions. Without your financial support, we couldn't do this. So please, a $10 or $20 or $100 donation a month just really goes far. We're a nonprofit. Everything's tax deductible and goes towards the mission of the foundation. Thanks to everyone who makes this possible. And Heidi and Josh, love you guys. Please stay in touch.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And all the listeners, take care again.